I have no notes. I'm going to communicate with you for the next 30 to 40 minutes, and I'm going to speak chiefly straight out of my heart and as my intuition guides me. I tend to think that makes the interaction all that more interesting. I do have a PowerPoint prepared with some interesting talking points, but I like to view this a little bit as a conversation more than a lecture per se. I'd like to start off with saying that for me, it's utterly comforting to be in a room with so many young, smart, libertarian and liberal people like yourselves, particularly in this day and age of geopolitical hiccups going on a little bit everywhere. Now, I see a lot of faces that I recognize here, but I'd like to draw your attention to a few of them. I'd like all of you to give a big hand for the team that have arranged this LibertyCon 2017. Militia, AO, the rest of the team, do give them a big hand. So, some of you will already know who I am. As I was coaxed out of hiding a couple of years ago by Johan Norberg, who couldn't be with us here this evening. He's doing very well with his book, Progress, 10 Reasons to be Happy About the Future. So there's a little bit of free advertising for you, Johan. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Henrik Jönnson. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. Since I started my first company when I was 17, I've established over 15 companies in the US, in the UK, and in Scandinavia. Many of them have been very successful. A lot of them have been total crap, I'll be honest with you. But that is what I do. I run companies. So I'm a bit of a different bud than you usually get in these kinds of environments. Now, you may ask yourself, coaxed out of hiding? Well, I'll tell you how that works out. I started my first companies in socialist Sweden in the early 1990s. Now, the one thing you learn as an entrepreneur, or as we used to call it back then, a small business owner, the one thing you learn is to keep your head down. You like to stay off the radar, because if you don't, they will begin to meddle with your business, and they will ruin it, and they will throw all sorts of spanners in the works. So that's what I did. I built my companies, and I built my wealth, all in hiding. Now, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of taste and wealth. Now, for those of you who missed that reference, I'll just live with the fact that you consider me rightly slightly eccentric by now. So in these circumstances, I'm a bit of an odd bird, because unlike most of you, I have very little formal training. I kind of represent a bit of a rags to riches story, in as much as I came from rather poor surroundings, and I built my companies on my own, and I did it in a socialist country, which we might touch a bit more on that later. So what I was eventually told as I reached this certain level of influence and freedom is that I got to a point where people started telling me, well, I am a staunch capitalist, and I'm very proud to say that. I believe in individual liberty, individual freedom. I believe in free markets, free people, and capitalism. Now, thank you. Now, a lot of people that you will meet in these kind of university surroundings, they tend to be really well-read. I'm not. By no means, I don't think I'm ultra thick. but I'm not traditionally schooled. I have a different set of skills. I gained a lot of street smarts and business acumen by building my own businesses from the ground up. I've never touched external capital. Everything I've done, I funded it myself, piece by piece, part by part. And that kind of puts you in a very interesting place, because I don't have to be loyal to anybody. I can say what I want. And that's why I had some people with the traditional education that a lot of you carry. They say, well, you should start speaking about these things, because it's not very often that we get to talk to people who are actually engaged in business. Well, I am, and I'm not under anybody's control, so I can speak freely. Now, I know that some of my managers are not all that happy that I do that. But these days, I spend about half my time writing, doing lectures like these. The other half, I spend running my group of companies in Scandinavia. So, I'm Henrik Jönnson. Here I am. You're welcome. Today we're going to talk about what I think is the most important thing there is. We're going to talk about the future. Now, I spend a lot of my time analyzing the future because it entertains me. I think it's of vital importance from a business perspective. And we're going to look at this from a slightly different perspective than the academic one today. I'll be raising a couple of questions concerning where I see things going in the near and long term, how that is going to impact civilization in general, the labor markets, how that will influence us who operate businesses, potential outcomes of these changes, if they're managed or mismanaged. So, now, this picture, those of you who are from Scandinavia might actually recognize this. This is a video. I'll just play that in a moment. This went viral a couple of weeks ago. When you want to discuss the future, I often like to think in terms of neophobia and neophilia. You will find, in a room like this, where I presume we're mostly liberals or libertarians, there will be a lot of neophiles around. And now, with a neophile, I mean that is an individual that relishes in change, that loves the new, the thrill of change, disruption, discovery, all those things. I, for one, I love it. On the other hand, there are also people or movements in society that I sometimes like to, slightly derogatory, like to call neophobes. Now that is being negative towards change, to objecting to progress, to disruption. This guy, let's see if I can play this here. This is in Swedish, but it's subtitled. So can you read this? Not if you can read it. It's fun stuff. So this is from 1983, Swedish television, state television. There were only 2 channels back then, both run by the government.
Snart 4 år och jag hittar ingen som helst privat användning av den. Det är faktiskt så att telefonnummer hittar man enklast i telefonkataloger. Kakrecept hittar man enklast i bakböcker och matrecept lämpligen i kokböcker. Boken är ett sällsynt bra sätt att förvara stora mängder information. Det är också så att de här så kallade hemdatorerna, vad man nu egentligen menar med dem. Men om man menar det som det är vanligast med sådana här hemdatorer, nämligen att man kör dem på sin egen hemma-tv, så har jag ett bra förslag till alla som funderar på att skaffa sig någonting sånt. Sätter 3 kvällar i rad på 40 centimeters avstånd från er färg-tv hemma, och så tittar ni igenom Rapport kväll efter kväll, 3 kvällar i rad. Om ni fortfarande vill ha en hemdator, så köp för all del en. Men jag tror inte att ni kommer att ha någon vidare användning av den. Annat än i ett avseende. Och det är om ni vill lära er programmera, så går det alldeles utmärkt att göra det också på en liten hemdator. Men att göra något meningsfullt hemma med den i övrigt, möjligen då spela spel, det kan jag inte se.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Herbert Söderström. Now, in all fairness, it's got to be said that in 1983, when this was broadcast, he was largely right. A microcomputer at that time wasn't all that useful. It was perhaps a toy that you would play games with. However, this was state-run media. They had 1 million-strong viewership of this sort of thing. So when they placed this sort of information out there, it had a great impact. Now, it's very easy for us to sit and laugh at this guy. I can see his perspective. It was valid in 1983, yet 10 years later, there was a computer in every home in Sweden. So I use Halbert as an example of the neophobe. I mean, he does not like this at all. He makes that abundantly clear. So there has always been this conflict between the tendency towards neophilia and the tendency of neophobia. And you can see that in all spheres. All these old stories and myths that are set to teach people how to behave, like the story of Prometheus, all these trickster gods in ancient mythology, that they offended the god by stealing fire and bestowing it upon humanity. I really hate that attitude. I really do. It's like in science fiction movies where you always have people say, oh, we have been dabbling with forces we should not dabble with. Well, dabbling is how you learn, you neophobe. We need to dabble. Now, another example of this. Now, here's a block of ice. You might recognize this, actually. Let's see if I can do that. This is from a Disney movie called Frozen. My daughters love it. This is actually a real profession. In the late 1800s in Sweden, it was a huge sector of employment. This is the days before refrigerators were invented. You had these guys that would carry great big blocks of ice on their backs and transport them into the homes of the wealthy so that they can use them to store meat and fish and other things before there were refrigerators. And when the refrigerator is invented, the union representing the icemen, they work for heavy taxation, they work for blocking the advance of the refrigerators so that these people are not to lose their jobs. Now, 20 years on, there are no icemen anymore, and there is a refrigerator in every middle-class home in Sweden. And regardless of the struggle that the icemen went through during those 2 decades when their profession became obsolete, few of us miss them today thinking, oh, God darn it, had the iceman been around, I would have been an iceman just like my great-great-granddad. Considering it your unique selling point to carry large slabs of ice, I mean, that's, it's limited value. So people move on. When a profession is phased out because it becomes obsolete, that does not mean that these people will be unemployed for all of eternity. It means we start making more valuable contributions to society. So this picture, this just shows how old I am. This is from the early 1990s. This is 1993, when the internet was new. Now, in 1993, I was operating my first company, and because I was so young, I was 17, and we were very successful, I got recruited to do a series of lectures around the colleges of Sweden. And they wanted me to speak about the future of the labor market. So it's a great gig. I love talking about the future. So I did. And I told them that, there is this thing called the internet, and it's all happening now. Pretty soon. It's difficult to think about it these days because it's so ingrained in our culture. But basically, I told them, we'll be able to send electronic messages to one another just like that across the globe. You might even be able to, make your dinner reservations on the computer. You might be able to, mind you, not stream. I didn't think that far. You might even be able to order videos you want to rent online. And those were the things I was telling them. In 1993, that was, believe it or not, that was really controversial. Nobody believed me. They didn't believe me. This is for real. They did not believe me. It was extremely obvious to anybody who is actually involved in the thing, but when it's outside of the mainstream, they will not accept a change that great when you tell them. Neophobia. Now, I remember distinctly, when I was 17 at the time, I remember distinctly after delivering this lecture to a group of people, a young man who was flabbergasted. He was very aggravated. He was my own age. And he stood up after my lecture and said, "What I'm hearing is that what you're saying is that if I want to give a flower to a pretty girl, I'm to give her some kind of bloody computer flower?" Now, I'm not one to gloat, but I'd bet you that that guy is really heavy on the emojis on Tinder today. So again, that's neophobia, neophilia. So most of you will recognize these. We'll be setting the stage for disruption, and we'll be talking about automation, digitalization, and machine learning. Now, I have companies involved in all of these sectors, so I work intimately with some very bright people who are looking at these things, and I think it's so fascinating. And I'll be bringing you a lot of information, first-hand information that I get from a lot of people that I talk to in these spheres that are actively involved in these three areas. And some of the stuff that I'll be talking about is going to sound pessimistic. It's not. It is a huge opportunity. The future is really bright and it's really exciting, and that's why I told you initially that I think it's comforting to be in this room with all of you liberal neophiles. Embrace the opportunity. I'm convinced, and I know that we have an opportunity to change the world in a very profound manner over the coming 15 years if we grasp that opportunity. So I'm taking the flagrant opportunity of really imparting this onto you. I think this is for real. This is not a joke. It's stuff that is actually happening. And if we use it the right way, I believe it can be tremendously useful. Now, this graphic here, this is from the New York Times. It's a couple of years old. This is just to establish the fact that the rate of development and adoption of new technology is accelerating. So if you look at the early 1900s, you will see that the telephone, electricity, the introduction of the automobile and so forth, these all had a very long, several decades long adoption period before they gained crucial traction, say above the 80% market penetration. Now, these are American figures, but they go with a few years offset. They're valid for Western Europe as well. So as we move towards the right, you will see how, like, the microwave took off around the year I was born in 1975, and that was much steeper. Same thing with the VCR, and the cell phone is really quick. So we see how this is getting steeper and steeper. Now, notably, missing here, this chart ends in 2005, is the iPhone was introduced in 2007, and that took just 24 months to gain a 50 million user base. And it was just a few years before the introduction of that particular piece of hardware actually killed off Nokia and sent them the way of Kodak, just killed off this huge multinational company with new technology. So user adoption is accelerating. And in the sense of software, it's accelerating even quicker. If you look at the social media giants such as Facebook or Snapchat, those get hundreds of millions of users adopting them in months. And that's very exciting because software can power a lot of change. So we've kind of established that things are accelerating in terms of development, and they're accelerating in terms of how quickly people accept new technology. I remember my grandfather, who would talk about when television first came about. They kind of did not want to get a TV because it seemed awkward. So resistance was a lot, neophobia, the neophobian tendency was a lot stronger back in the day than it is today, which I think is great. So this is a map of the United States. You can see this is the most common profession in each of the states. So in nearly every state, truck driver is the most common profession. The Mormons are doing well. They're software developers in Utah. But for the most part, they're all truck drivers. Now, you've all heard about this for so long, I'll probably add some information to it. What is the next sector to be automated? It's transportation. And that means, now we're talking on the bleak side of things, that means that all those people are obsolete. And they're not going to be obsolete over the duration of 50 or 100 years, they're going to be obsolete in less than 10 years. Now, given the outcome of the last election, which is largely a product of the fact that people are concerned about their jobs, things are going to get a lot worse in that respect before they start getting better. So this is a quote from Norway Today. It's a great newspaper. We read it in Sweden all the time. No, we don't. The first self-driving cars and buses can roll on Norwegian roads as early as next fall. That is this year. This is really happening. I'm actually involved with a company that works with this kind of logistics for getting people about. This is happening. They're actually beginning to automate in Oslo this year. Volvo in Gothenburg, Sweden, currently have a fleet of 240 autonomous cars cruising around the streets of Gothenburg. This is happening. And we're moving into a space where it will not be possible to compete with human drivers. When I came here today, I used Uber to transport myself into my Airbnb. It works a charm. The guy that brought me, I'm sure he was a nice chap. He didn't speak any English, but he had an app and I had an app, and my app had told his app where to go. I mean, that's so close to just being software. I'm sorry. So that is going to happen. That disruption is definitely happening. Transportation is the first thing to go, and produce, transport, these big trucks carrying iron ore in a convoy of 5 vehicles, one guy in each, smoking. It's all gone. And good riddance, like the Icemen. It's not that I'm saying that these people are going to have a terrible time. Yes, the disruption is going to be bad. It's going to be hard. Considering that map of the US, that is going to be problematic. But they will move on to do better things to add more value. This is the interior of a new Volvo. What really weirds me out with this picture is that he's reading a physical book. So this leads me on to the next sector that I want to emphasize in how it's going to be impacted by automation. Given that we automate the cars, let's use that as an example. We automate the cars. The model that is likely to be used is not one of ownership, but one of a business model more like that of Spotify, where you will stream a vehicle, you will pay for access. So I subscribe. If I need a car, I will use my smartphone or whatever, and a car will present itself. And I can drink champagne while it's driving me. I don't need to worry about having an accident. It will take me where I need to go. Now, if we do that, there are some great green benefits in that, because we can reduce the total number of cars in the large metropolitan areas to about 10% of the current population of cars that we have. That's awesome. They can park themselves underground in spaces which are not necessarily all that nice to people. So the green benefits are awesome. It's not so great for manufacturing. Now, I was speaking with the CTO of Saab the week before last, and they're doing a lot of work in automating their vehicles as well. Not once during our conversation did he mention selling a car. They know full well, and they have for a long while known, that they're no longer in the business of selling cars. They are in the business of solving transportation. It's awesome. They know it, and we should know it too. In terms of manufacturing, I want to make another example. This is not just the car industry. If you look at the US and the UK, actually had an increase of textile production, that is, making fabrics, cloth, of 37% between 2011 and 2013, and that is because of reshoring of jobs that have been put out to developing countries, because they put in place automated robotic machines that are so efficient that they outcompete even the cheapest labors in the third world. Now, given that there's less than 10% of the workforce in the UK and in the US that actually work in this sector, that displacement has meant very little. People don't perceive it. But the disruption is there, and it's in the third world. Because all of a sudden you have all these factories closing down, because now you don't have to carry those T-shirts from Malaysia back into the UK, and you have robots making them locally. So all of that is definitely changing. Now, talking about the service sector. Now, this is a hamburger that is made by robots. In San Francisco, right now, there is a company called Momentum Machines Incorporated that have a fully automated McDonald's drive-through restaurant built. It's in beta trials. You can actually try it. It's on the Oakland side, on the other side of the bridge. The average McDonald's restaurant spends about $135,000 annually on wages, which means that you will actually pay for full automation of your McDonald's units in just over 2 years. So you do the maths. It's going to be automated. Not only that the business owners are going to save money, there are also a lot of benefits to having machines prepare your burger. It's probably more hygienic. It's going to be quicker, fewer mistakes. And that classic quote that people like to use in movies, "Do you want fries with that?" That is no longer going to be a valid question, because you will already have told the machine what you want when you use their interface to tell it so. It's a no-brainer. So that's an example of the service sector. The retail industry is the obvious example. I mean, think about this. Everyone knows this. How companies like Borders used to sell books, huge company, international, closed down. Blockbuster Video used to be one of the biggest media companies, distribution companies in the United States, closed down, and they're replaced by Amazon for books and Netflix for video. So the advantages of moving those businesses online are just so powerful that you simply cannot compete by being a high street shop in the traditional sense of the word. Now, look at this. This is really awesome. So not only, let me just turn that down. Not only is the fact that by moving things online, you don't have to pay all those people, to pay the rent, the electricity bills, and the rest of it. By being a global company, that distributes goods globally, the economies of scale are so tremendous that in 2012, Amazon acquired a company called Kiva, which makes these beautiful robots. So this is one of the huge warehouses in the United States where Amazon houses all the goods that they ship. There are no people in those warehouses. These robots carry around the products and put them in boxes where they're meant to be shipped out. Some of you might have heard this joke people say about manufacturing and warehouse tending in the modern age. You know, there are only two jobs. It's a man and a dog. The man is there to feed the dog, and dog is there to make sure that the man does not interfere with the robots. Shopping. We're still talking about service sector, retail. Now this is an example, this is like a concept sketch, I think, of augmented reality. A lot of you will have been to Tesco's or Walmart, these big grocery chains, and we all know how they're tending to switch towards self-service checkouts, which makes it possible for them to cut costs. It's actually convenient to not have to queue up because they can have more of those stations, so it's quicker for you to exit. In Japan, they have a few shops that actually are digitally intelligent, so when you scan your groceries, you've kind of already paid for them, so you just can just leave the store. And in this case, this is another sector that I am actually involved with one of my companies, because we do a lot of work with virtual reality and augmented reality, where we add information up on top of the experience that the user is already having. So even the days of having people standing in the aisles, "Can I help you, sir?" Even that is going to be obsolete, and it's going to be obsolete very rapidly, because your glasses or your smartphone is going to be telling you not only where you can find the diapers, but it's going to tell you that you probably need to get some diapers because I've checked the storage in your home and we're running out. So that's adding value. That's adding tremendous value. And mind you, this is still on the level where we consider ourselves going into a warehouse to do actual shopping and not just having an autonomous vehicle deliver it to your home. So far, I've been talking mostly about simpler jobs or blue-collar jobs, but what we've been talking about is equally true for the white-collar sector. So let's touch briefly on how this is going to affect journalism, law, medicine, accounting, project management, and so forth. Let's start by looking at journalism. In 2012, there was a company established called Narrative Science Incorporated. They make a great piece of software, an artificial intelligence journalism software called Quill. Quill currently produces a story every 30 seconds. And what it does is that you just throw a lot of information at it, and it will make sense of the data and make it legible for human beings. Sports journalists were the first to go. Most of the media houses actually use this software, but they won't acknowledge its use. It's part of the contracts that they sign that you're not to say it, because nobody wants to feel like they're reading a machine's assessment of the favorite football game. But it is already happening. Stephen Levy, the Wired writer, actually estimates that within the next 15 years, about 90% of all online journalism is going to be written by machines. That is not to say that there won't be room for professional journalists, but this run-of-the-mill, short, simple stories, they're already going. That is not going to be something that people will be doing. Now this story here, this is about the world's first robot lawyer. The title is somewhat misleading.
Ross is the world's newest super intelligent attorney, super artificially intelligent attorney, that is. That's right, you can now be represented by a robot lawyer. Kind of. Baker Hostetler, one of the biggest law firms in the United States, says it's hired a robot named Ross. Now, Ross won't be cross-examining witnesses anytime soon. Instead, the AI attorney will act as a legal researcher for the 50 human lawyers in Baker Hostetler's bankruptcy division. Ross is built upon Watson, IBM's cognitive computer, and it can search through thousands of legal documents and monitor the law for changes that can affect a person's case in order to save time for lawyers. Baker Hostetler's CIO, Bob Craig, told Newsbeat Social that while Ross is still early in the venture, the attorneys who have used it have, quote, experienced an increased efficiency in use of time. What do you think? Would you trust a machine with your case? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comment section below. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Molly Reel.
Okay, so what's already happening there is at the level of the paralegal, which is essentially the pre-bar lawyer. Usually that means you're an intern, you're establishing yourself at the legal firm. That whole sector of work is obsolete because what you tend to do, your task as a paralegal, is to read through these near identical texts every day, looking at shareholder agreements and so forth, identifying the 3 to 5% of the text which is different, which is changed to reflect the specific requirements of each case. So you magic marker those and then you pass it off to a real lawyer that decides what to do with it. Now that sort of thing is so obviously suited to machine learning, so that these type of Watson-driven applications, they even offer suggestions to the lawyers as you should probably do this. But there will definitely be, for the foreseeable future, a place for proper lawyers. After all, they write the laws, so, same thing for medicine. There was a case in Tokyo a year and a half ago where a bunch of doctors had failed to diagnose and treat a woman who was suffering from severe leukemia. After feeding the genetic profile of this person into a medically trained Watson application, it came up with a totally different diagnosis through sifting through tens of thousands of case studies. And it suggested a different line of treatment, which apparently worked a lot better than the one the doctors had been suggesting. Same thing with an image recognition technology, which is exploding right now. I'm sure all of you saw those creepy Google Deep Dream images that were trending like 2 years ago, where everything turns into a dog. Well, it doesn't turn into dogs anymore. They use this to be able to diagnose, for instance, people who have respiratory problems, lung cancer and so forth. And they have currently a 97.7% accuracy with computer scan identification rate, which is a few percentage points higher than what highly trained human beings have. So that is also changing. So the great disruption. I've just picked a few cases that I've been in touch with myself, but this is really happening all over. So everything is changing. Now it sounds like doom and gloom. The one thing we need to know, there is some kind of precedent for this. The Great Depression, that whole time, before it, about 90% of Americans were farmers. Afterwards, most of them moved into cities and started working in manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution took that was about a 200-year process of going all together from agriculturalism into the industrialized society. What's happening now is exciting because it's so quick. And we'll see in Asia, a lot of countries are actually just skipping the industrialized revolution altogether and just going straight into the information society. Now, there are a couple of things to note here. And here's my first really important point that I want to drive home. And because of the things that I've been telling you now, don't believe the hype. People will be telling you that the way to solve this, oh, it's happening, we're really concerned, but we need to tax the robots. Yeah, but that's a serious discussion. People want to tax, or will tax my company for owning robots, for instance, so that we can pay a basic income to everyone, because everyone is going to be unemployed. That is not only ridiculous, it is also not going to work. And there are a number of reasons for this. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, I'd like to draw your attention to this, the cost of sustenance. And I've not come across people talking about this anywhere in this discussion. So I'd like for you to have a think about it, and maybe something will come from it. But the point is, people are, oh, how will we all live? These little machines will be doing everything as well. What am I going to do? I used to carry ice, The cost of basic sustenance in a society that is almost fully automated, things get really cheap. If you live in a 3D printed building in a part of town that has been designed by machines, or you're transported by autonomous transport to a retail store which is self-manned, which is populated with produce that is grown by robots and transported by automatic drones, things get really cheap. So, well, those capitalists that will just, that they will increase their profit margin. Well, competition, competition is not invalidated just because people use machines. So prices will be coming down. Basic sustenance. I mean, the way we live today, a lot of you will probably have seen this. This is by Cato. I think it's a couple of years old now, but it's such a beautiful illustration. This is like using less to produce more. I love that metaphor. It's so intelligent. It's really satisfying for me to look at. But the way we live today in most of the Western world is like we live like aristocracy lived 100 years ago. All of us, we live in heated homes with artificial light. Everyone's got this piece of black glass in their pocket, which gives us access to the information of the whole world. All these amazing things, we take them for granted. And it used to be tremendously expensive, if possible at all, to live at the level which we all take for granted today. And given the lowering cost of sustenance, we'll have a much easier time surviving on much less. Now, that is not to say that it's not going to require money, because it will. It's just not going to be it's just not going to be that. So I think it's really crucial to remember that I think we really fiercely have to oppose the idea of a universal basic income, because I, for one, I can't see how that will not just lead to hyperinflation for one thing, and the other thing is I think it's going to be inherently unfulfilling for the ones receiving it. Is that, they pay me this money because of, I breathe. That's really dissatisfying. I mean, I'd rather be carrying blocks of ice on my back than just get money for nothing. I think that would be a horrible situation to end up in. So, where does that land us? The cost of basic sustenance is really coming down. It's going to be very cheap to have a very good life. We'll still need money to putter about. This is actually the working title of my current book. My publisher hates it. I think it's funny. It's actually an example of a pet peeve of mine. A pet peeve that I've kind of started to coming to terms with. You all know of these incubators and innovation hubs and the innovation ecosystems and so forth. I don't know how it looks. I mean, you represent a wide variety of countries, but I can tell you, in Sweden, the place where I grew up, the place that made me close down my first business because they wouldn't let me hire and fire the people I wanted to, so I moved to the United States, Sweden. They love entrepreneurs these days. So politicians have cleverly and deftly decided that in order to maintain relevance, oh, we love entrepreneurs, and we want to help you. Well, you know, I like to retort in the manner of Ayn Rand. I say, well, hell, you want to help me? Get out of my way. Of course, they don't like that. You know, they're defending themselves, so they start these government-run incubators where they say, we want to stimulate the local growth of companies, and we help you, you know, through innovation. And what tends to come out of that, and I've been really provoked by it for a lot of years, because in the city of Malmö, where I live, where I run one of my companies, I've employed almost 120 people over the last 2 years. Nobody talks about that, but if somebody in one of those incubators hires 2 people, it's first page news in the papers, because it's great. The innovation system is working. So that's what they like to do. And the politicians love it, because they get to take photo opportunities with, you know, young visionaries with interesting facial hair, and it's all very fantastic. It's really silly if you ask me, because you tend to have people who do not know how to read a balance sheet, let alone write a proper business plan. They dream up some concept and then they woo a politician who has no inkling whatsoever what entails or what is required to run a business, and say, yeah, we'll just give you some money because it's so amazing, a social network for dogs. I mean, why didn't I think of that? So that's been going on for a while, and that's very silly, because very few people who actually know what they're doing, they need any of that stuff. However, I call this the all-singing, all-dancing entrepreneur musical. The reason I believe that the word entrepreneur has become so important with modern politicians that want to stay relevant is because they know, in some sense, they understand that, because that is what everyone will need to be. Because the traditional forms of work are becoming obsolete. Now, and I dislike the idea of basic income, but it's already started, and they're doing it through the innovation systems. Now, this is what Schumpeter talked about. Basically, how useless middle class kind of will vote themselves privileges and move in to defend those privileges. These people move into the innovation hubs, and they get given money. They get given money because we believe in your idea. They don't know a good idea from a bad idea. What's actually happening there is a covert basic income. So what needs to happen in that respect? What needs to happen in that respect is that the government needs to be phased out of that equation, and it needs to be replaced with private capital. For instance, if you were to make it tax-free to use some of the profit of my companies, I could just funnel that into innovation centers. As far as my numbers are correct, it would be enough over a duration of 10 years for 1 out of 1,000 of those companies to actually work. Most of them can be completely useless. You just give them a few tens of thousands of euros and they can go and have a play. That's fine. If one out of 1,000 makes it big, it will carry the whole scheme, because there will be so much revenue coming. And it denotes a really important shift from welfare and benefits into actually underlining the importance of individual responsibility. Even though your idea sucks, you're still the one with an idea. So we'll give you money because you have an idea. Okay, here you go. Have a play. Try it. We'll hope it will be great. And in the low-cost, low-sustenance economy, you get that money, you'll be able to live off of it for a few years. I believe that this can be an important part of solving that problem. And we're already seeing it implemented. I'm staying in a great flat here in central Prague, an Airbnb flat. I got personal service. They even brought me an umbrella because it might rain. Very pleasant people. The sharing economy, it's such a provocation for the political class because it means that people are cutting out all the middlemen and just interfacing with one another, just solving problems, supply, demand, mechanics on an immediate human level. It's a thing of beauty. A friend of mine called Maria Eriksson, she conducted, and you might visit her blog, it's a lot of fun. She did an experiment called 365 Days of Sharing. How many minutes do I have? 5 minutes? Okay. She did a thing called 365 Days of Sharing, where she basically wanted to live in the sharing economy for a whole year. So she took this scheme, which was online, which was basically a joke, called Airbnb, which is where you let out your bathroom for people who need to take a leak. Now, because she's a somewhat public figure, when she wrote about this on her blog, that actually reached Swedish Parliament. And their reaction was, how do we regulate this? Nobody's making any money from that, but that is the gut reaction. So they will want to interfere with all those stuff. Now, I got to wrap up, so I'll do this really quickly. 1, the neophobes always lose in the long run. Remember Herbert Söderström. Technology trumps conservatism and politics. Technology drives politics. Politics needs to react to the technical realities of social media, of manufacturing, and artificial intelligence. Politics does not drive evolution. The rate of development and adoption of new technology is accelerating. We're facing massive, inevitable labor market disruption. The cost of basic sustenance will approach zero. Loss of income could be alleviated by circular investment in the manner that I just spoke about. And we can talk about that at length, and I'd be happy to carry that conversation with any of you. And that concludes my talk. I'd like to leave you with a few words that has guided me through my years as an entrepreneur. And believe you me, in the 90s, that was some controversial stuff. I'll read this by memory, so let's hope I get it right. Do not let the fire in your heart go out, spark by irreplaceable sparks, in the hopeless swamps of the not now, not quite, not yet. Do not let the hero in your soul perish in lonely frustration over the life you desired but were never able to reach. The world you desire exists. It is real. It is possible. It is yours. It is ours. This is Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged, 1957. Reason be blessed. Take care of the future for us. Thank you very much.